How Fortnite slowly made you hate Chapter 1. Now, the return of Fortnite Chapter 1 was one of the most requested, most hype things in Fortnite history. Everybody wanted it. Not just the map, but the feel, the movement, the memories. OG Fortnite wasn't just a setting. It was an era of, endless bliss, of happiness. And honestly, even though it probably was a bit dramatic, a lot of people wanted this back. A lot of people wanted this hype era in gaming to return for years. And after years of waiting and endless theories, Fortnite finally gave it to us, and at first it felt like the biggest W ever. Of course, we had it in Season OG, but that is not what people wanted. People wanted a permanent return to the Chapter 1 map to where they could interchange between modern Fortnite and old Fortnite and relive all of those memories whenever they wanted. But of course, like happens with things that seem too good to be true, it didn't live up to expectations. The bugs hit, then there was the bots, then the lack of updates and transparency. At first, it seemed like Epic just messed up, but what if they didn't? What if they wanted you to walk away thinking, yeah, maybe OG Fortnite wasn't that good after all. Maybe I just have my nostalgia glasses on, and maybe it really had nothing to do with Fortnite or the Chapter 1 map. Maybe it just wasn't that good. Now, guys, I think I may have one of the biggest Fortnite conspiracies on my hand here, so I want you to just bear with me. Now, return of the Chapter 1 map looked like fan service, but it just felt a little bit off. The announcement of the OG mode was framed as giving players what they'd always wanted, a permanent return to the Chapter 1 map. They brought back all of the iconic POIs and skins, but skipped the full experience. Key features, certain, LTMs and systems were left out of the rotation. In the OG mode, we weren't just experiencing a few different seasons. We were experiencing exactly how it was like back in the day. That is how they promoted it. We were going through every single season, every single month. Everything seemed awesome. The community celebrated, and while they were celebrating, small inconsistencies started to show off the bat. Things just didn't feel right. Some of the models were different, some of the sounds weren't the same. People were finding some Chapter 2 models placed into Chapter 1. Instead of fully immersing us in OG gameplay, it was like a cosmetic shell of Chapter 1 was pasted over modern Fortnite. Now, of course, like I said, came along the bugs, glitches, and silence in this mode. The OG mode launched with severe issues. There were matchmaking bugs, there was broken OG pass progression, audio was cutting out, and frequent stuttering on this map. Additionally, some of the stuff in the game just didn't work. Like I said, some of the models weren't the same, some of the sounds weren't the same, and Epic's response was minimal to say the least. Players waited days or even weeks for just basic fixes in this mode. That was one of the biggest announcements that we had had in years inside of Fortnite. And instead of hot fixes or direct communications, updates focused on cosmetics and minor balance tweaks, as well as keeping the game somewhat accurate to how it was in the game, adding in certain features like, the chug jug or the dual pistols, things like that. Now, this lack of urgency made it feel like the OG mode wasn't high on Fortnite's priority list. It was more of like a side project that they were just going to let fall apart in slow motion, which I think is exactly what we need to pay attention to here. Now, as you guys know, and I talked about this in my previous video, there is a crazy bot invasion in OG right now. Some OG Fortnite matches can contain as few as 8 human players, with the rest of the 100-player lobby filled by bots, up to 92 bots in some cases. Now, initially, promotional material suggested that there would be no bots in the OG mode. Like, Fortnite actually sent out emails and content to creators that were going to promote this new mode and said that there were going to be no bots in the OG mode. It was going to be nearly exactly how it was back in the day. Without bots, the matches felt so competitive and engaging, very, very reminiscent of 2017 Fortnite. When I tell you guys that that was the most fun I've had on Fortnite in years, I genuinely do mean it. That first day of Fortnite OG was absolutely awesome. It was amazing. It was euphoric to me. Now, the sudden addition of bots diluted this authentic OG experience, and to be honest, you guys, I feel like these bots, including all of the bugs and the non-transparency from Epic Games, was by design to make us hate Fortnite Chapter 1 and to kind of tarnish the memory that we had of these times. Additionally, Fortnite claimed to bring back the OG Fortnite, but the game was still using modern movement, modern UI, and modern physics. There was no OG jump fatigue, no classic animations, no pacing that matched early Fortnite's slower, more deliberate feel. Of course, people have gotten better, so builds were faster, edits were cleaner, and it just didn't play like Chapter 1 even if it looked like it. Longtime players felt the disconnect immediately, especially with bots being added. It wasn't nostalgia fading, It was just a different game wearing a nostalgic skin. And this is the thing, you guys, with Fortnite talking about, you know, not adding in the movement or everything, or the old movement and stuff, I definitely feel like they could have done that. And whether or not they should kind of is still up in the air with me right now. I'm not 100% sure how I feel about it, but I definitely do think that not bringing back the OG movement was a deliberate choice. What it does is it completely changes the entire pace, the entire gameplay of the Chapter 1 map. It is just that one thing that they didn't bring back to make it feel that much more different, to kind of have an itch in your brain wondering why exactly this doesn't feel how it's supposed to, and that is exactly what they want without it being readily obvious. Now, one or two of these oversights like this is a mistake. You know, that could just be mistake. A dozen of them, you know, maybe even 10, 20 or more, repeated over weeks and weeks, feels like a deliberate choice. Every core complaint, you know, the bugs, the bots, the movement, they stayed unresolved and more so unrecognized, unaddressed by Fortnite long enough to affect player perception. It started to feel almost intentional, like they wanted you to realize maybe this just isn't as good as I remembered. You know, like I said, maybe I had my nostalgia glasses on. Maybe this game just wasn't that good back in the day. You know, maybe it's just not what it is anymore. Maybe I just grew out of it. And the goal, what exactly is the ulterior motive? To break your attachment to OG Fortnite so you'd stop asking for it every season and you'd stop looking back on it so fondly. Now, what exactly is this going to end up doing? What exactly does Fortnite want to happen with this? What they want to do is they want to kill the nostalgia for old Fortnite so that they can push the future of Fortnite. As you guys know, Epic Games is all about the future of gaming, all about the future of communities and online gameplay, online experiences, and Fortnite right now is all in on UEFN, collabs, and new monetization models, and OG just doesn't really fit that vision right now. By letting the OG mode kind of flop in this way, really not paying attention to it, Epic, you know, subtly just nudges, kind of pushes the community to focus more on, you know, things like creative, creator-made maps, and live service content that they are releasing right now. It's way easier to sell players on the future if they stop clinging to the past. Like I said in the beginning, after every single event, after every single game-changing mechanic, everyone was like, when are you going to bring back the OG map? When is this going to happen? And it started around, you know, Chapter 2, wondering when exactly are we going to go back. And it seems like what Fortnite kind of did here is they kind of just threw us a bone and said, you know, go have your fun for a second and you'll be back. And it seems like they intentionally made this specific mode, made the OG mode not identical to how it was in the past, to make us think, kind of like a sort of subtle manipulation in a way, to make us think, dang, this really just must have not been as good as I thought it was. Times have changed. It's time to move on. Now, the OG mode became less of a love letter to fans and more of like a controlled burning, you know, enough to calm the community, but not enough to keep them asking for more, if you know what I'm saying. So overall, you guys, the disappointment around OG Fortnite wasn't just about poor execution. It might have actually been by design. You know, Epic wanted to just close the book as hard as they could on Chapter 1 by rewriting how we remember it. I don't think you guys hated OG, and that's a lot of the things that people are saying, and this is exactly what they wanted. They wanted people to say, oh, now you're realizing that it just wasn't good as it was back in the day. It's just not as good as you thought it was. And I'm actually, you know, a victim of this. Like, I thought this in my old video. My last video, I said something about it. I said, you know, maybe it just wasn't as good. You know, maybe we romanticized it too much, but that's maybe exactly what they want to think. They made sure your return to it felt bland, it felt buggy, and overall, it just felt unfulfilling in general. So that when you log back into the main game, it feels like moving forward, not going back. But let me know what you guys think down below in the comments. What do you guys think about the OG mode possibly being deliberately bad to make us hate Chapter 1 of Fortnite and kind of move on and look more towards the future? Maybe Fortnite was even just trying to get rid of these old players that keep asking for stuff that they don't want to do. Maybe that's what they're doing. Who knows? But let me know what you guys think. I will read every single comment down below. I think this is a really, really interesting thing here. Like I said, it's pretty much like a Fortnite conspiracy theory. Drop a like on today's video if you did enjoy. You watched all the way to the end. You must have enjoyed, so drop a like. Subscribe to the channel. I make videos like these every single day. Use code PROZEROYT, and I will see you all in the next one. Peace.